I hate making this video, but I know that I have to. このビデオを作るのはとても嫌なんですけど、作らなきゃいけないビデオだと思います。The title of this video isn't a farewell address to Japan, but I'll be back in Japan. このビデオのタイトルは、日本への別れの挨拶ではなく、日本また帰ってくるよという、また戻ってくるよというタイトルなんですね。But first I want to explain in English, and then at the end of the video, I'll talk in Japanese. このビデオ、まず最初に英語で話して、それから日本語、私が言ったことを日本語で、訳します。This trip has been one of the greatest evangelism trips that I've ever had in my life. Apart from the time that I went to Japan last summer. Number one, I feel like this was a complete trip. I got my driver's license in Japan. But I think more than that, I think God's plan was, and anointing was on this trip. And, I just think of the young men that heard the gospel when I was preaching at Kofu. These young Japanese men, my age, who are very tough, and also who love skateboarding too. And so I really want to touch that community the next time I come back to Japan. And I think about all the gospel tracts that I handed out at Kabukicho in Shinjuku, where young girls who probably who are in the prostitute industry because they're struggling financially, they were receiving the gospel tracts left and right. And I've never had such a time where so many people were so receptive to the gospel tracts. And I've never had a time when so many young guys were just eager to hear the gospel when I was preaching it. I also think about a few homeless people that I reached out to, and they were so thankful for just the food that I gave them, and were just ready to read the gospel tracts that I gave them. And so this defines the work that God is doing in Japan. And I think about the time that I was in Japan Kingdom Church, and just Pastor Marcel, like just the gospel music that really touched and healed my heart. Like this is what and the time that I spent New Year's with my family, and New Year's with my family, I think about that, and I think about just the way that I was able to preach the gospel, to my brother and to my mom and to my grandparents. And so this defines what my work, not only my work, this isn't to boast about what I did, but what the Lord is doing in Japan, and also the good works that God prepared beforehand. Ephesians 2:10. It's not my works all the work that I'm doing in Japan that saves me, but this is God's grace on my life. And this is God's grace towards the Japanese people, and to my family as well, and to the church community in Japan. And that is what defines this trip that I did in Japan this time. And so lastly, I want to say, before I leave America on January 18th from I believe from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., right before my plane flight to America, I want to preach at Shibuya Crossing and declare that Jesus is Lord in Japanese, and have closure for this trip, but I'll be back in Japan. Hopefully sooner than May. But there's just one factor that in my life that I'm still waiting for God to answer on. And if God says, nope, don't continue with school, then in America, then my mission field will be fully in Japan. And It might be very painful for me if things with school don't work out, but, I need to answer God's call. I don't know why the Spirit's leading me this way, but I think I'll say this honestly. And sometimes it's hard to be honest. But things need to break in my life for me to be the man God called me to in this nation of Japan. Things need to break in my life. I still remember the first time I came during summer. The song that God was wanting me to sing was a song that was made by Joshua Mina. I think he was inspired by a pastor. And the lyrics go, "You allow things to break in my life to make sure that I see with my eyes. You are making a place for the blessings that you prepared." And so, if school is the factor that God needs to break, He will. And I need to be ready for that. I need to be ready. Or something will break in my life, and I need to be ready. Ready to answer God's call. Because I've received the word when I was in America last time. Between the time that I came the first time to evangelize in Japan during summer and this time, I received a word from my dear brother in San Diego. I received this word. He said, and this is from the Bible, but I think this perfectly applies to my calling. He said, "You must deny yourself." Jesus said that. You must deny yourself, pick up your cross, follow after me. But at that time, I still remember it was October, 2 months before I came here to Japan. But he told me, you must deny yourself. And when he said that, God spoke. He said, "Tokyo." It's my calling. As well as my future calling to start a bilingual school, or not start a bilingual school, but just to be a bilingual teacher in Japan. That requires a lot. So the mission isn't complete. I need to be more broken. Because God's calling is great. Anyways, I didn't know I would talk so long. I think what I'll just do is just listen to myself and have subtitles in Japanese. So I'll just do that. Just because I know I talked so long, and I know I talked in very simple English, so that should be easy. But I'll make sure I do my edits. I know I got my new computer too, so I think I'll just put the subtitles in Japanese. But yeah, so I mean that summarizes my trip to Japan, and so I'm not going to say like exactly when next time I'm going to Japan, but by the latest I'll come back in May. But I could, but I know I could. But I know things need to break. I do know things need to break. Because God's calling me to something great. So I'll end the video here. But things need to break for me to step into the anointing.